Hey guys, and thanks to everybody for coming in. I know it's Sunday and everybody's basically tired from the conference and so on. But I feel that this is a pretty interesting topic, and I have a lot of experience to share from what we've been doing the last couple of years. So I hope it's interesting. My name is Lubo. I'm the CMO at ZaRiba. And I'll be talking about VR. So obviously, you may have seen a lot of these guys around the conference in different forms and fashions. I'll be focusing on mobile VR. So a little bit of background on us. We're not that well known in Bulgaria, but we've been in the business for more than 10 years now. We've been doing a lot of different stuff. We've published more than 40 games, amassing nearly 30 million downloads worldwide. So even though this is one of the few events that we do in Bulgaria, we're very well known in Western Europe, the US, even Asia, and so on. We've worked with a lot of interesting companies, but I'll get to that later on. So these are just some of our games. You might have seen some of those on the App Store, or you might have even played some of those. For example, this one was a top game in the UK for a number of weeks when it was originally launched. It was ahead of guys like Facebook, YouTube, and so on. It was #1 for the entire UK App Store for a number of weeks, which was a pretty big success. We've also had a lot of other games climb the top slots in countries like the US, Canada, Switzerland, and so on. So in terms of companies that we've partnered with, we actually originally started out as an outsourcing company. We've worked with guys like Disney, Burger King, McDonald's, obviously Apple, Google, and so on. So these are just some of the more interesting companies that are more well known. But we also have partners in Asia, for example, that we have pretty good relations with. So I guess that's kind of a little bit of background on us. This is a story that I wanted to share from back in the day. Probably nobody can read what that says because it's in Spanish. But it's just to illustrate the kind of impact that some of our games have had. So I think it was 2012. El Mundo is one of the biggest newspapers in Spain. So we actually found out a couple months after this actually happened. But Fatima Banes is the welfare minister in Spain at the time, and they're in this national crisis, okay? And people are rioting in the streets and so on. And she gets caught playing one of our games. And she tweets out a score that she did on this game called Bubble Shooter Adventures. And the media are like all over it, and it was a pretty big scandal in Spain. And it was really funny because we didn't even know about it, we didn't plan for it. Just one day we found out that we're #1 in Spain for whatever reason. And I just wanted to share this because I thought it was funny that we're the last people to find out that our game blew up in Spain because this prime minister or whatever was playing it during working hours and tweeted out our score. So that's a story that I think was worth sharing. So what is VR? Basically, if you guys haven't tried it, or first off, how many of you have actually tried VR before? That's good. So I don't have to explain a lot about what VR is. So you've probably tried it. You put the thing on, you put your phone in there, and you basically get this 360 immersive experience. Okay, so the setup is pretty simple at this point. Initially, it was, a lot of people thought it was high-tech and so on, but it's basically a pair of lenses that you basically put your phone in there, and you get a 360 image. That's it. So one thing that I want to make clear is what the difference is between VR and AR. That might be a little bit of misunderstanding. So VR is virtual reality where you're totally immersed in like this 360-degree experience. And AR is actually when, for example, if somebody's played Pokemon Go or whatever, you hold up your phone and you basically get this digital overlay on top of the real-life image. So you might use VR for stuff like going on a trip to the moon, for example. and you might use AR for like shopping at IKEA, and you want to pick out a new chair for your living room. So that's the biggest difference there. So another thing that I wanted to point out is that there's obviously a lot of different types of VR. So you have mobile VR, which is this thing, and you have desktop VR, which is like HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, and so on. So I'm going to be focusing on mobile VR and explain why in just a second, but bear in mind that there is desktop VR as well. You've probably seen it on the show floor and so on, but here we're going to focus on mobile VR. So one interesting thing that's happening in mobile VR right now is Google's Daydream project. So we actually came back from Switzerland 2 weeks ago. We were invited by Google to this top secret boot camp where they unveiled a bunch of the newest things that they're working on in terms of monetization and so on. So Daydream is one of those things. It's not really brand new, but it's still something that a lot of people haven't tried. So it's an iteration of the initial cardboard design. So if you guys have seen an actual first generation cardboard, it's made of cardboard, obviously, and it's not that good to put it on your face. It's not that good in terms of like tracking and so on. So this is an iteration of that design. So it's basically a much better feel, it's much better finish, and people like it a lot more. The other big difference is this thing. It has a controller. If you guys have tried out VR before, you might have felt that it's kind of strange to not be able to navigate easily. Like, for example, I have a remote. I can do stuff with it. If I'm in VR, I can't really do a lot. You have just this pointer, and you need to do everything with the pointer itself. So that's really not the best kind of interaction the user has with the product. So this is a small controller, but a really big difference. So this controller has like accelerometers in there, it has a bunch of sensors, and this is something that you should really be on the lookout for if you're interested in VR in general. Because like maybe in a year from now, this is the biggest type of device that everybody's going to be using. Right now it's really fragmented. For example, I have this pink thing that's made in the US, somebody else has like one that's made out of cardboard. It's really fragmented. But this is Google's attempt at basically putting this all together and creating a really good device that people enjoy using. And we've seen that people really like it. One of the bigger problems there is that right now only two devices support it. There's the Pixel and this HTC whatever. So it's going to take probably a year or more to get more device supported, get more people to buy the thing. It's a little bit pricier than the initial cardboard, but it's going to be really big at a certain point if it continues in the same way, because people enjoy it. But it's kind of a middle ground between desktop VR, which is like Oculus Rift, Vive. On the other end of the spectrum, you have cardboard, which is like 10 bucks. You put your phone in there and it works. And you have this thing, which is 100 bucks, for example. But it's a much better experience. So moving on, these are some of our VR products, actually. One thing that I didn't mention before is that we're actually the biggest mobile developer and publisher in terms of VR content. So these are some of our games that, for example, if you type in VR in Google Play, you basically get, for sure, some of these games in the top 20 worldwide. So that is why I feel like the things I'm going to share with you are a pretty unique experience in the sense that we've been through a bunch of stuff and we've seen some stuff that might be helpful for you moving forward. So, for example, this is roller coaster game. Pretty simple, but it's the most played roller coaster worldwide on Google Play, for example. This is an escape room game where you basically need to solve different puzzles and move to the next room and potentially escape. This is a monsters game. I'm not going to tell you what you do exactly, but people jump up and down, and it's really funny. We have a lot of people breaking stuff downstairs trying to play this game. So if you want to see any of these in action, feel free to drop down to the show floor, and we'll get you tuned in. Moving forward, so the VR myths. What are the myths about VR? And when I say myths, it's not necessarily that they aren't true, it's that they mostly aren't true at this point. So one thing that people say a lot is that the Matrix is coming. So yeah, it does feel futuristic, it does look cool and so on, but we're nowhere near that kind of immersive experience and just general great user experience that the guys from the Matrix show off in the movie. That's not necessarily a myth though, if you fast forward like 10 years or so. The biggest thing here is the potential. The potential is there, the concept technology is there, and I feel like it's just a matter of figuring out the best way to move forward. But right now, no, we're not in the matrix and we're nowhere near it, but maybe in 10 years or so. The second thing, that it's expensive. I get a lot of questions on the show floor from people who have never tried it out before, asking how much does it cost. So obviously that's a long answer, but the short version is 10 bucks. You can get a cardboard device for like a viewer for like 10 bucks. You already have your phone in there, so you just put it in and you consume free content. That's it. And I feel like this is the best approach for people who have never actually seen VR before. Obviously, you guys have seen it, so for first-timers, I feel like it's basically a free thing that people can do and just say they did it and know what it's all about, because it's the biggest hype right now and probably for a couple years to come. The last thing, which again is not totally false, but it's getting better, is that VR gives you motion sickness. That's maybe true for a lot of the earlier products and a lot of the earlier headsets and so on, but things are getting better and better as the software and hardware get better and better. So for now, I think it's already a myth, but moving forward, it's going to be totally forgotten. Obviously, there's people that puke their brains out when they play the roller coaster thing, but that's very few and far between. One of the last things that I wanted to share are some facts that I regard as facts because we've seen that they work and we've been in the space for a while now. As I said, probably more than the majority of gaming companies in general. So the first thing is that VR is here to stay. That wasn't necessarily a fact maybe just a year ago. So we've been all over the world at various conferences, like, for example, GDC in San Francisco, China Joy in Shanghai, Gamescom in Cologne, and so on. So we've been everywhere, and we have a pretty good feel for what's going on in gaming in general. And something that is just starting to emerge on a pretty big scale is VR. And that wasn't a fact like a year ago. Everybody knew about it, kind of, Oculus Rift, their Kickstarter campaign, then subsequently being bought by Facebook and so on, is a pretty big thing. But people were like, it might turn out to be a big thing, it might not. But right now, it's a sure fact that VR is here to stay. It's going to be there in the long run. What it's going to accomplish is another question altogether, but it's going to be there. If you go to any conference, even here, you see that you have like at least 20 or 30% of companies doing something in VR. Whether it's desktop VR or mobile VR, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, but it's there. The presence is there and it's not going anywhere. The second fact, I think, is that it's still in its infancy. It's obviously nowhere near what it could be in the long run, but I feel like users need to know that this is not the end game. For example, the end game is not having something like this stuck to your face and having your phone in there, having your battery die out, and so on. The end game is something totally different that nobody really knows what it is right now, but it's not this. And it's something that I feel like could change a lot of industries moving forward. So for example, if we also bundle AR in there, it's something that could potentially save lives as well in terms of like teaching medical students how to perform brain surgery, for example, or teaching rocket science, how to do rocket science, or I don't know. But the fact is that the technology is still in its infancy, but there's a lot of potential there, and there's a lot of things that they can accomplish. Um, and I feel like it's important to also know that it's not really worth investing a lot of money if you're a consumer in something like an HTC Vive, for example, which costs a lot of money, and you also have to have the right PC, for example, in order to be able to play anything, unless you're a geek. If you're a geek, you can spend a lot of money there and enjoy it right now while it lasts, but in like 2 years' time, you're gonna need to buy something else. For a general consumer, I think that this is the best path at this point. But it's gonna change. In like a year, you're gonna need something else. But if it's 10 bucks, whatever. The biggest achievements are advancements, rather, are yet to come. That sort of touches on the same point in the sense that we are going to see a lot of interesting things in this space, and we're really gonna see a lot of industries being changed based on these facts and based on some of the myths that they just mentioned. So that's basically it. I feel like I don't want to bore you with a lot of details on what we did right and what we did wrong, but I really need to try and explain to you guys that VR is something that a lot of people could get on board with, and at least for now, I feel it's something that you can just put on, try it out, see how it goes, and just know what it is. But it's definitely something that's going to be there in the long run, and at least for us, it's a pretty good business case. As I mentioned, we're one of the biggest developers and publishers in the mobile VR space, and maybe one of the biggest takeaways, if I back up a little bit, is this slide. So if anybody has any questions or comments or whatever, just shoot me an email and can discuss it. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this whole thing. For example, if you're an aspiring developer and want to pitch a game concept, or you're a company and want to outsource like graphics or development or whatever, shoot me an email and we can make it happen. And I think that's it. Cool.